All right, welcome back, everyone, to another Bitcoin Knots versus Core debate, discussion, however you like to call it. Two back-to-back episodes on 2 days in a row. Yesterday was definitely a guest that was very pro version 30, maybe not necessarily pro core. And this time, we're giving you the opposite side. We got a guest that is very pro knots. Welcome, Chris Guida, to the show. And of course, our co-host, Jimmy Song, as well. Chris and I go back a long way, probably 2016 or 17 when we met for the first time in Denver. Came out to Denver for the first time. Met yourself, a few other people, including our good old friend Dupree. That was fun times, man. And then we were definitely hanging out in Argentina and a few other places around the world. All right, Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Tone. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Just for your listeners, my last name is Guida, not Guida. But yeah, no, me and Tone go back. And I think it might have even been before that. But yeah, the Denver Bitcoin Center and running our meetups there. That was fun. And I've seen you at a bunch of conferences and stuff. So yeah, we go back.
All right, awesome. Jimmy, anything new with you in the last 24 hours?
Well, first, we didn't record yesterday. It was the day before yesterday. Just right.
Oh, was it? Okay. Damn.
Yeah. It was 2 days ago. I think you're getting like time things, but like we're gonna be in El Salvador in like a week. So I think all of this.
Yeah. In fact, all three of us are going to be in El Salvador in a week, and I was just added to a panel. So Adam Back was replaced by me on the panel of myself, Johnny Bear from Block Size Wars, on a panel with Luke and Mechanic, moderated by Giacomo Zucco. That's going to be interesting.
Wait, yeah, Adam dropped out of that?
Yeah,
that's strange. I thought I'm pretty sure he's in El Salvador. So
Adam will be in El Salvador. I don't think he wanted to like debate Luke on stage or something. I don't know. I mean, not that he's scared to debate Luke, but I don't think. Anyway, I understand why Adam doesn't want to do it. I don't understand why I want to do it, but I will do my best. And El Salvador is going to be very, very interesting. All right.
Just a point of I have a question. So, which of you is supporting the core side? Because I feel like both of you are pretty.
At least we're the hosts here, and we're not really necessarily taking a position. At least in these interviews, we try.
Gotcha. Okay, so you guys are more neutral, and I'm sort of a NOS proponent.
Well, at least in this interview. I mean, like the last one we challenged Wirdum on a lot of stuff, and that was kind of the point, right? So
now, by we challenged Wirdum, it was more like Jimmy challenged. So Jimmy does more of the challenging of the Bitcoin Core guests, and I do more of the challenging of the NOTS guests.
I think I challenge both, but yeah, we'll leave it at that.
As the shows go on, my position is becoming more clear, and people don't like it. Anyway, we'll get to that. All right. Hey guys, I do have a hard stop in an hour and a half at 7 p.m. Eastern. I have a hard stop. Hopefully we get through it all. If not, there can always be a part 2. So without any further ado, Chris, why don't you lay out your position? Well, first of all, maybe do a little intro on yourself. I'm going to pull up your Twitter profile and then lay out the position of NOTS, like how the movement started, how the movement is going, and where do you see the movement headed?
Cool. So hi, everyone. My name is Chris Guida. I'm a professional developer since 2010. I've been in Bitcoin for over a decade, as we just said. I've been a developer in the Bitcoin space since 2020 when I started working for Start9. And I've moved through a few different jobs since then and open source grants, focusing mainly on dev education and merchant adoption now. And especially getting people to run nodes. So The Knots position. So Knots is kind of a decentralized movement, I would say. Luke, obviously is the lead maintainer of Bitcoin Knots. So that's become like a focal point of the movement. But I see the Bitcoin Knots movement as just Bitcoiners in general. And I see this other group of people that has come in recently as more on the shitcoiny side and less on the Bitcoin maximalist side. And obviously we can disagree about that. So I can't speak for the whole Knots movement, but I can speak for how I see it, which is basically, Bitcoiners want Bitcoin to be money. We want it to be sound, unstoppable money. We want it to be peer-to-peer cash. We want it to be, a good store of value and a good medium of exchange. We want it to do all of the things that money is supposed to do. And the reason why Bitcoin is innovative is because it does both the medium of exchange aspect and the store of value aspect at the same time. And so it's the reason why there's no ceiling on the price of Bitcoin is because Bitcoin is poised to become the global reserve asset. And so that's why Bitcoin, is so volatile to the upside. Well, it's volatile to the downside also, but mostly to the upside, is because its potential, if it reaches its full potential, it actually replaces the dollar as the reserve asset. But there's no way that it can do that unless it becomes a more useful medium of exchange than the dollar. And right now, it's kind of struggling to get there. It has very solid store of value properties, but these properties will become more limited soon if it can't become a better medium of exchange. And I cite gold as an example for an asset that's a good store of value, but a poor medium of exchange. And I see Bitcoin as potentially meeting the same fate as gold if we don't focus on making Bitcoin widely used in commerce. And so basically, over the last few years, there's been this push to, there's been sort of a hype or a craze around making these shitcoins on top of Bitcoin. So it started with ordinals, and then there were runes, and there were a bunch of other ones. There's like stamps and stuff. And these the spammers will say, oh, we've always been around. We've been sticking arbitrary data in Bitcoin and doing doing our, well, they won't say shitcoiny things, but they're shitcoiny things. There's been counterparty, and there was these things have been around for a long time. And the thing is, we've been fighting them the whole time, as Satoshi was fighting them. And so there's just this kind of ongoing battle between the Bitcoiners who are trying to make Bitcoin good money and the spammers or the shitcoiners who don't care whether Bitcoin is good money, and they're just kind of parasitical on Bitcoin and trying to gain in the short term at the expense of Bitcoin's usefulness. And so so in 2014 there was actually an opportune war, and actually Johnny Beer, who you mentioned, wrote about this. He has a great article in the BitMEX research website that talks about the opportune wars and how the Bitcoin devs at the time were very hostile to data spam, and they actually caused Ethereum to be built as its own blockchain, sort of indirectly, because Vitalik was looking at the opportune war, and he was going, wow, if I try to build this thing on top of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin devs are just going to break my protocol. They're just going to rug me, basically. And so that was very smart of him. And so he went and made his own blockchain, and ended up making a lot of people very rich in the short term. But I think all of us can agree here that Ethereum generally is not a direction where we'd like to see Bitcoin go. And so, looking back on that episode, it's very clear to me that the Bitcoin maximalist culture that was hostile to the spammers is largely the reason why Bitcoin is successful today, and has avoided the fate that we've seen Ethereum and all these other shitcoins suffer. And so basically it's just the next. So the ordinals and the runes are just like the next generation of that. Right. It's just the next generation of, Ethereum heads and shitcoiners who are trying to, move all their casinos and scamming on top of Bitcoin. And we really just need to do exactly what we did last time, which worked great, which was treat them with hostility and tell them, no, go somewhere else. So I think that's a pretty good start. I gave you, to Tone, you were reading it before we went live. I gave you my response to Peter Wola that I wrote on Delving Bitcoin. I was hoping to have a back and forth exchange with him, but as you noticed, it's really long. It takes probably maybe half an hour to get through just my post. And if you read, it's actually, so Peter posted something on Stack Exchange. Actually, somebody else posted a question on Stack Exchange, and then Peter wrote a response to that. And then I posted this on Delving as a response to Peter's response. And then Peter responded to me, and then I responded again. So that's like 5 messages. But then he never got back to me. And that's kind of where the conversation got in terms of the technical conversation around spam. And the core side likes to paint our side as like non-technical, but this is just wrong. They like to say, oh, there were no technical objections to removing the upper-turn limit. There were plenty of technical objections to removing the upper-turn limit. They just ignored all of them and pretended like they didn't exist. So if they hadn't, ignored us and they had actually taken our concerns seriously, then Bitcoin might look a lot more different today. But as things stand, basically they ended their long and respected tradition of coming to rough consensus about big changes like that, and they decided to just ignore most of their user base. And so here we are now. We see BIP 444, also known as RDTS or BIP 110, which is a movement which is really a reaction against core version 30's effectively sanctioning arbitrary data storage as an official use case on Bitcoin, which is it's just totally anti-Bitcoin, and I don't see why real Bitcoiners would put up with this. So anyway, it's been really heartening to see that it seems like BIP 110 has a lot of support, sort of grassroots support. A lot of the sort of intelligentsia of Bitcoin is slow to take a side, but I think insofar as that's happening, it's because they don't want to rock the boat, and well, I guess we can get into reasons why they may not be having the courage to take a stand. But anyway, so I could go on and on, but I think that's a good starting point.
I think that's a good place to start, is maybe the difference between relay filters and consensus, because that's really what BIP 110 is all about. It's bringing some of these rules that were sort of allowed at the relay level and sort of shutting them down at the consensus level rather than at the filter level. And that's do you feel like that's necessary at this point because of Core v30? What's the logic there? Why is that so important at the moment?
Yeah, so basically, leading up to this episode, Bitcoin Core was seen as sort of the authority in Bitcoin. They were seen as this like decentralized organization that takes consensus of its user base into account. And over the last, like half year or a year, they have shown that they are no longer doing that. They are no longer taking rough consensus into account and just running roughshod over sort of the anti-spam side's concerns. What was your question exactly?
Why do it used to be, hey, let's handle these at the filter level.
Now is it necessary?
Level. Do you feel like this is necessary now because the filters? Yes. Convinced filters don't work? Like, what's the deal here?
So what happened is everybody trusted Bitcoin Core to make good mempool policy and good spam filters leading up to last year. And then leading up to really it was mempool full RBF, I think, when they sort of started to drop the ball on that. They used to implement, sensible defaults in policy. They have various different filters for different purposes. They have, like anti-node DOS filters, and then they have anti-network DOS filters, which I consider spam filters to be a type of. And they made good decisions about that. And then starting with mempool full RBF, they started basically being like, well, we're just going to deactivate mempool full RBF by default. And the thing is, Bitcoin Core's defaults are really sticky. Whatever Bitcoin Core's defaults are set at is what most of the network is going to run. And so if somebody like Peter Todd is trying to make a change and trying to, make mempool full RBF a thing, and Bitcoin Core says, no, well, we're going to leave it off, then it's really, really hard to work around that. But Peter Todd actually found a way to work around that, which was basically make a precursor to Libre Relay, and make a bunch of nodes that preferentially paired with each other, and then and just have a handful of nodes do that, and then partnering with some miners that were willing to sort of go against Bitcoin Core's defaults. And so he saw a lot of success with that. And so I think he just kind of decided to continue with that. But the result of that is that Bitcoin Core's mempool policy is now no longer respected, right? It's just seen as this thing that's there that nobody has to care about. It used to be that that Bitcoin Core's mempool defaults were highly respected because they had the backing of the community. They had the backing of the node runners who were actually running the nodes, and they actually, they were able to give feedback on which types of transactions they were going to filter. And so Bitcoin Core would take that into account and adjust its defaults based on what the node runners preferred. But then they stopped doing that, and then the miners just started ignoring what Bitcoin Core was saying, and now nobody's really paying attention to Bitcoin Core's defaults. And so then, Peter Todd just went all the way, and he resubmitted a PR that he had posted a couple of years ago to remove the opportune limit and all the controls to allow node runners to limit opportune sizes. And this PR was closed the last time it was put up, but this time it was accepted over the complaints of the user community. And so the effect of this is that Bitcoin Core is the closest thing we have to an authority in Bitcoin. And so if Bitcoin Core says, well, it's okay to store arbitrary data on Bitcoin, because that's what they're implying by getting rid of the opportune filter, that legitimizes both opportunes, large opportunes, and large inscriptions. Because inscriptions, remember, were used as a rationale to get rid of the opportune filter. And so both of them have been legitimized now by Bitcoin Core v30. And so what that does is basically, just looking from an outsider's perspective, it looks like Bitcoin has decided that arbitrary data storage is a valid use case. And this has really, really bad effects. So there's...
Well, we're gonna get to the effects. I got a bunch of stuff to say already on everything you said, Chris. Before we get to the effects of removing the opportune filter, so you are constantly referring to the user base and the community and all that. But I'm sorry, but maybe in 2014, the Bitcoin community were people on Twitter. That is no longer the Bitcoin community. It has moved way beyond. It has moved way beyond people on Twitter. Okay, and you also said the word real Bitcoiners.
Yeah, I know, Tone.
I want to know what your definition of a real Bitcoiner is. We'll get to that. And you also mentioned Core's defaults are being ignored. I don't really understand what you mean by that. I don't see Core's defaults are being ignored. I see Core's defaults are being taken very seriously, hence the whole NOTs movement because of Core's defaults. And not to mention, because Core's defaults are so critical and clearly important, not unimportant, don't you think Core takes its time to decide before changing defaults? You seem to think that they are making these changes nilly-willy without proper thought process, where I disagree. I think a lot of thought was put into it. And while a large chunk of the community may not agree with it, this was definitely not a random choice. This was clearly thought about for a long time. And like you said, the pull request was not accepted in the past, but it eventually was, probably because of rethinking. All right, comment on all that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think there were a lot of kind of straw men there. I don't think that the Bitcoin community is just people on Twitter. That's definitely not what I think. So I actually worked for a company that helps people run nodes for a few years, and my main job was trying to make it easier and cheaper to run a node.
Why is that better? I understand cheaper, right? At the moment, right? I'm starting to believe that making it too easy to run a node is what is escalating this controversy to begin with.
Whoa. Tone, you really gonna go there? Really?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
That you think less people should be running nodes? That's your
I
position?
don't think less people should be running nodes. I think people should really know what they're running and not buying nodes and plugging something into a wall and suddenly they're running a node and they think they know exactly what they're doing.
So you don't want people to check their own transactions and not trust
I do
people?
want people to check their own transactions, but plugging a node into a wall and running stuff, checking their own transactions, somehow makes them qualified on deciding whether the removal of opportunity is good or bad, right? Anyone can run a node right now, right? And somehow the ability to run a node somehow makes everybody an expert on relay policy and consensus rules.
I don't think that's what people do. I think if anything, they set their own policy on their own node, which is completely their right to do. What it sounds like you're saying is that it maybe gives them sort of like some sort of illusion that they know more than they do, but that's true of anybody and anything. I don't think a node gives them like something like that. I mean, there are people that opine on all kinds of things that they're not qualified to speak about and think they're very smart about it. It's not a Bitcoin node that makes them that way. It's more their personality or something like that. It's a little weird to me, Tone, that you're pinning this on somebody running a node and suddenly they think they're Bitcoin experts or something like that.
Well, and that's not even the claim, right? The claim is not that because you're running a node, you're a Bitcoin expert. The claim is that if you're running a node, you have experience running a node and you understand what makes it easier and harder to run a node. And I experienced firsthand and secondhand and thirdhand many instances of the spam attacks that happened in 2023 and 2024 incontrovertibly making it harder to run a node. And so like if you're somebody who's running a node and you're helping other people to run a node, you have a lot of knowledge about what sorts of things node runners like and what sorts of things make their lives more difficult. And spam absolutely 100% makes node runners' lives more difficult. And they should be able to give that feedback on PRs in the Bitcoin core repo, which is software that they run. I don't think that's unreasonable.
All right, we will move on from there then. But again, you're mentioning things like real Bitcoiner. What does that mean?
I think a real Bitcoiner is somebody who wants Bitcoin to succeed. We have this thing, Bitcoin maximalist culture, which I think is actually one of the only things that separates Bitcoin from shitcoins. And actually, the Opportune War that happened in 2014 was an example of Bitcoin maximalist culture defeating shitcoiners. And in 2017, the block size war was the same thing. Bitcoin maximalist culture is very important to Bitcoin survival. If we lose Bitcoin maximalist culture, then we lose Bitcoin. Either Bitcoin becomes, an uninteresting pet rock like gold, or it becomes a shitcoin casino like Ethereum. And so Bitcoin maximalist culture basically keeps Bitcoin alive and makes Bitcoin continue to have value and continue to grow in value. And I think that a real Bitcoiner is somebody like that, right? Somebody who values, honestly, decentralization. Honestly, somebody who values running their own node would be an example of a real Bitcoiner. If you say you don't need to run your own node, you're starting to sound like an Ethereum head. Just use MetaMask.
I'm not saying you don't need to run your own node. I'm saying running your own node does not make you an expert in these matters, and everyone seems to have a crazy opinion. And
so you think it's
their own node? It's giving them confidence that they really know what they're doing.
No, but I'm saying, so you think that more people running nodes is a good thing, and less people running nodes is a bad thing, right?
More people. Well, yeah. I mean, okay. Yes, more people running nodes is obviously a good thing. But as far as the decentralization of the Bitcoin network, Like whether there are a few thousand nodes or a few 100,000 nodes, that doesn't make the network necessarily like that. Like the scale there isn't. It's not going to make that much. Okay, fuck. How do I say this? I care more about resilient nodes. This is where I'm about to start a big argument with Mechanic, right? I wasn't going to go there yet. To me, I care more about resilient nodes, right? This is where I have a huge problem with the NOT side going crazy over CSAM and extra stuff on their node, right? They don't want their stuff on their node. They don't want that kind of stuff on their node, right? Even though it doesn't actually...
I don't want anything that's not money on my node. I don't want anything that's not money on my node.
I know you don't want it, right? But I want people willing to run resilient nodes, right? So, for example, I'm really trying not to state why I'm not happy with the NOTS camp, right? And one of the main reasons is because to me, the community is forcing a form of censorship onto people not to store stuff that is consensus compliant, right? Because right now, right, with removal of the op return, right, consensus isn't changing. We're just changing basically the relay policy. Right?
Wait, okay, so you're saying that because Bitcoin allows, in its consensus rules, it allows people to store large files in large op returns, that we just need to let everybody turn Bitcoin into a file storage network instead of using it as...
I don't expect that to happen at all. And I'm not expecting that to happen at all.
You're not expecting it to happen, but if it did happen, that would be bad, right?
Well, it wouldn't happen, right? Because we're still limited. There's still a size limit, right? But there's still a size limit, right? So it can't happen.
It can happen.
It can't happen. There's a size.
It's consensus valid to store 1 megabyte of op return of contiguous data in the blockchain. That's consensus valid, and it's policy valid right now. If you follow Bitcoin Core 30's policy to go up to 100 kilobytes, those are pretty large files. And so if we do nothing and just let everybody stuff data in there, that's what they're going to do. I mean,
no, they're not. But there's absolutely no evidence that they're going to do that. And
they've already been doing it. They've already been doing it.
There's a lot of block space and it's fucking empty and cheap, right? So I'm not worried that spam is going to overrun financial transactions. So I have confidence in Bitcoin that financial transactions will completely drown this out. My concern is...
you have no evidence for that claim. There is absolutely no evidence for that claim. The evidence is all on my side, which is that we have to keep fighting against data spam, which is what we've been doing.
Let me just finish, right? If Bitcoin financial transactions can't keep the spam out, then Bitcoin was never meant to succeed. And I really couldn't care less, right? So I am 1,000,000% confident that financial transactions will drown this shit out. Because if they can't, then Bitcoin as money was never meant to succeed. That is my opinion.
No,
I don't need fact, but that is my opinion on the Bitcoin protocol.
Okay, well, that's just incorrect.
Now, when I see people, right, wanting to make a fork change to make sure potentially evil things that can't even be seen, you have to run third-party software to see them, can't enter it, then what are they going to be scared to run on their node next year when the government makes a law saying you must KYN, know your node operator? These people that are too scared to run these nodes now are certainly going to comply with other things. So to me, the nodes that matter are resilient nodes that aren't scared of some government
do you run
policy,
a node?
not more nodes on the network.
Tone, do you run a node?
Yeah.
Okay, so if horrible people start taking horrible videos and pictures and cramming the Bitcoin blockchain with megabytes and gigabytes of this just horrifying content, and that sort of becomes Bitcoin's dominant use case, are you going to keep running a node?
Why do you assume that's going to be the case?
Because there's lots of demand for other people to store your data for you for free. Like,
it's not free.
like
But it's not free. But it's complete. It's not free. Bitcoin is not free data storage. It's actually very expensive data storage.
You have it, no, but you have an upfront data cost. But no, what I'm saying is the node runners are providing the service for free. Nobody's paying the node runners to store that data. And so basically you're just becoming a storehouse. You're just becoming like a hard drive that anybody, a public hard drive that anybody can use for anything.
But you're not storing extra data, right? Like you're going to store X amount of data, right? If Bitcoin is a usable protocol, there is a 1 megabyte limit, right? It's not like you're storing extra data. You are storing
the amount of data is not the relevant thing here, Tone. The amount of data is not the relevant thing.
Okay.
Yes.
The amount of data doesn't matter.
It's annoying that there's a lot of okay. The relevant thing is that Bitcoin is designed for monetary purposes. Bitcoin is money. If you say Bitcoin is also for data storage, then data storage, I know you just said you believe 1,000,000% that this would never happen, but I believe 1,000,000% that it would happen. That if you give, let me finish. If you don't bias block space in any way towards monetary usage, then it will become biased towards non-monetary usage. People want to store data, and they want node runners, thousands of node runners around the world to store it for them for free. And again, there's an upfront cost, sure, but that only goes to the miner that mines the block initially. But the cost is borne by the network for eternity.
All right, I think you guys kind of agree on some stuff and kind of don't agree, and I got to be honest, I'm a little bit in between on this stuff. So I agree with Tone's point that eventually that financial transactions will price out everything else just because they'll pay more. And whatever child porn thing people want to store or whatever, it's not going to go near those limits. That said, we don't know all the applications of this stuff, and who knows what people might come up with that might be sufficiently profitable where it might be worth doing that or something like that. I don't know. It's a big unknown. I suspect that Tone is right, that financial transactions will price all of that out. But I'm also not completely certain of that because, like you're saying, Chris, it's possible that people will put stuff there where if they have an economic incentive to do so, and we don't know all of the economic incentives around arbitrary data storage of this type because it's never really been out there like that, right? There aren't protocols where you have a single insertion fee and tens of thousands of nodes store it. Like that's not something that anyone has done before in like computing, period. Like that's not something that anyone has done. So
it's not sustainable.
Yes. Well, so this is where I'm like there's an important economic claim here. And I think there's a point that Tone is making, which is that financial transactions will price other stuff out, which I think I agree with, but I'm not entirely certain. But at the same time, there is this storage cost that every node has. Now, this is limited, like Tone said, to 1 megabyte, at most 4 megabytes with, SegWit and stuff like that. But one or 4 megabytes of block weight or something like that per block. So it is limited in that sense. So you can't just store any super large file that's greater than that, for example. But that is sort of like a little hole in there that like I'm not sure you can say specifically that financial transactions won't price out this stuff. That this stuff is economical, or that there's incentive for people that would do it on a consistent basis for a very long time. At least we don't know of that yet. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I just haven't seen it, and I think that's kind of Tone's point that we haven't seen it on the blockchain yet, right? Like especially with respect to CSAM or whatever. There has been other stuff where you're economically incentivized, specifically with respect to shitcoins on Bitcoin. I think we all know that there's economic incentive there with respect to some sort of token generation event or something like that. But beyond that, I have trouble seeing whether arbitrary data by itself is something that can be that's economically incentivized to sort of work in this manner where it'll price out financial transactions.
I mean, so it kind of doesn't matter whether the market really exists for this stuff. I think it does. I think the bigger concern is that the government prints money and they can make as many Bitcoin transactions as they want, and they could flood the Bitcoin blockchain with this stuff. And if it can be argued in a court of law that, well, one of the legitimate uses of Bitcoin is data storage, then anybody running a node and storing this stuff is liable for what gets stored on there. If
I actually want that. I want that to happen, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, so you want to be liable for storing other people's data in the clear, and no matter how horrifying it is.
I'll explain why.
I think it's more along the lines of building resilience. So, like, if no one is running a node, just like kind of not caring what the government says, then you basically are captive to the laws of the jurisdiction that you happen to be in. So in which case,
it's not about what the
government can just say you're not allowed to run a node, and all these people
you just
that
said
are quote unquote liable would have to comply.
Yeah, I mean, so legal risks are not the only risks, right? Mm-hmm. Those are important, but that triggers Bitcoiners. Mm-hmm. So what is more important to me is I don't want to run a node where the super majority activity on the network is file storage. I didn't sign up for Bitcoin to be a file storage network. There's already IPFS. There's already BitTorrent. There's already Nostr. If you want censorship-resistant file storage, you should use one of those. Bitcoin is not,
and they're orders of magnitude cheaper, right? Like, and that's kind of the point. And is that the economic incentives don't, at least currently, don't make it so that Bitcoin would be used in that way, because all of these other methods are much cheaper. Now, that said, it's possible that someone wants 10,000 copies of 1 megabyte file of some kind, and that there's some economic advantage to doing that. I can't think of any at the moment, but I'm also not going to say there exists no possible way that's something that would economically incentivize somebody. So it's a little bit like,
I mean, it's obvious to me that if you want to store a file and Bitcoin lets you do it, and that's an officially accepted use of the Bitcoin network, that people are going to do it. Like
but why would they do it if it's cheaper to do it elsewhere in a much secure way? That's
because it's uncensorable. It's actually it's uncensorable for the rest of eternity. Okay, so this has a lot of really harmful implications. One of which is that it's really easy to scam people into buying your NFT if you put it on Bitcoin, because you're like, oh, the Bitcoin nodes have to store this data forever, and so you have this like bulletproof guarantee that your data is never going to be deleted.
So your argument is mostly around the permanence of it that people would pay for. I'm not sure I've seen people demand that level of permanence or be willing to pay for that level of permanence.
But that's what
I will concede that is a possible way in which that could price out certain other types of transactions.
Right. I mean, nuclear waste breaks down after 1 million years, but these scam coins are still around after that, for the rest of eternity. And so again, it may not be a rational choice, but it's definitely very easy to scam people into thinking it's a rational choice, and that's the problem.
Chris, I'm gonna quote you if I remember, because you said it 2 minutes ago. You don't want to run a file storage node. You said it. You don't want to run a node if
Correct.
it's going to be.
Yes, if I want to participate in file storage, I'll run BitTorrent, or I'll run IPFS, or I'll run Nostr.
You don't want to run that node, but removing the arbitrary limit does not actually change the amount of storage you are doing, or it may slightly change.
It legitimizes it.
What? Because Core said so. That legitimizes it. So now you're saying Core is the authority.
I mean, they're the closest thing we have to an authority, and if they make a change, like raising the limit of the size of a file from 80 bytes to 100,000 bytes, and there is no resistance to this, then it becomes the standard on the network, and Bitcoin becomes officially a file storage network.
I completely disagree with that. I fundamentally disagree with that statement.
So what the Knots movement so what the Knots movement and the Bitcoin 10 movement are doing is they are that resistance, right? They are the backlash against Bitcoin Core to avoid that becoming the standard on the network.
But you are it's a resistance movement to a statement that people like myself, who I consider a real Bitcoiner, fundamentally disagree with that statement, that removing the op return limit turns Bitcoin into data storage. I disagree with that assessment of the removal of the op return, and so do a lot of other Bitcoiners.
Right,
so
but
now
you're also
you're
saying
authority of what data storage is.
But you're also saying that if data storage has more demand than monetary use, then Bitcoin wasn't meant to be, and you're fine with that, and you're not going to fight it.
But op return had nothing to do with that, right? Because with the removal of the op return limit, right, if op return is getting maxed out, the amount of data you would be storing on your node, assuming blocks are close to full, is less. So now your total storage capacity is actually smaller.
Tone, that's irrelevant. I already told you the amount of data is not the important thing.
You agree with that statement?
Yes. If the blocks are full of op returns, they're 1 megabyte. If they're full of inscriptions, they're 4 megabytes. And so op returns are better than inscriptions. They're both horrible, okay? That's completely irrelevant, okay? Because what they're doing is they're redefining Bitcoin from money to, let me finish, they're redefining Bitcoin from money into a file storage network. And nobody who's into Bitcoin signed up for that.
But Chris, but Chris, if you just said the difference is completely irrelevant, file storage is file storage. So if the difference is completely irrelevant and Bitcoin is file storage versus financial transactions, right? This is what I'm saying, right? Whether the op return limit was there or the op return limit wasn't there, if non-financial transactions are overtaking financial transactions, then Bitcoin is pretty much useless as money, regardless of whether op return limit was removed or not removed.
Yes, but the whole point is that the policy limits make it harder to use for data storage. That's why they're there.
Can I interrupt? I think I'm trying to bring clarity to this this debate that you guys are having. The big thing is, and this is something that I know Luke is very big on, is that op return is a designated field for arbitrary data. That's what it was from the beginning, right? When it was 40 bytes, it was whatever arbitrary data about this transaction goes into this field. It was later expanded to 80 bytes, and now it is more or less 100,000 bytes. And this quote unquote legitimacy handed to that, or that's the purpose of that field. Because it's the purpose of that field, the idea is that then now this can be something that people use for this thing for data storage, and it's not like sort of encoded in this thing. Now, I'm not entirely sure I buy that argument, to be honest, because there are lots of ways to encode stuff, and but I do understand that that's his position, that it's a legitimatized one because that's the purpose of the field. And if you use like an RPC command to get the details of a transaction, one of the fields is here's what's in the op return, right? Like here's the data for this, the op return of this particular transaction. So and this is the important difference, I think, between legitimate and non-legitimate, authoritative and non-authoritative, is that it was designated for that particular purpose. Now, for you, Tone, I think you're saying that if it whether or not it is, like it shouldn't matter. And I think I hold that view too, is that like who cares who designated it as whatever. You should like I'm gonna run my node regardless, and you know, like I don't feel like the liability issues really matter. But for other people, certainly a lot of people in the Knots camp that are particularly concerned about CSAM, this becomes a major issue versus putting it into, what is it, 512 byte chunks and inscriptions or whatever, using opif and things like that. So like, is that what you're saying is the key difference here for you, Chris, the legitimatization by core of op return or as data storage?
Yes, that is what precipitated, to answer your question at the beginning, that is what precipitated the push to change the consensus rules, that core has officially sanctioned file storage of up to 100 kilobytes by, as you said, relaying transactions that include op return outputs up to 100 kilobytes by default. And so, you may be a core developer and you may say, I don't agree with this usage, but your actions say something else. And Bitcoin is decentralized, right? There is no authority, but in the absence of an authority, you have to look at what the thing is doing to understand what it is. And if the thing is being used, if Bitcoin is being used for file storage more than it's being used for money, then it's not really money, right?
But again,
now it's file storage.
But you're making this again inherent assumption that because there is a quote unquote viewpoint that some authority of a decentralized protocol, which may or may not actually be an authority, right? A perceived authority has changed how they normalized spam, and somehow this perceived authority of a decentralized protocol that in name and maybe a tiny bit in code has approved the possibility of Bitcoin having a little extra, data in this one other thing that would actually make the whole blockchain more efficient from a data storage perspective, will somehow turn the entire Bitcoin protocol into free infinite data storage for CSAM. Like, I don't understand how you're making that leap.
Well, to be fair, I don't think that's what Chris is saying, that it's now infinite data storage. It's just that you're unnecessarily adding liability to node runners, which I know it isn't like necessarily the biggest concern for you, Tone, because you want resilient node runners, people that will run a node
Correct.
no matter what the government says. And I agree with that, right? Like I think that's so I like, in a sense, I'm kind of like man up to a lot of the people that are kind of scared by the liability of whatever.
But if Bitcoin stops being money and it starts being its dominant use case is as file storage,
so
man up is not going to work.
No. But that's the part where I'm not sure the analysis can necessarily go, because the evidence that we have so far is that financial in times of bull markets, for example, when you have a lot of transactions, those things get priced out, right? Like the inscriptions or whatever, the really cheap stuff or data embedding and things like that. So my gut feeling is that, and I think there's good reason to kind of go with Tone here, the financial transactions do price them out. Now, I'm not saying that will definitely be the case, but I am saying that seems more likely than your scenario of people using it as, storing porn or something.
We've seen this on
the dominant thing.
It's not only
we've seen this on BSV.
It's not only financial transactions pricing them out. Each one of these things is a short-term fad that comes and goes, and a year later, everyone forgets. Like, who the hell is using runes right now? Who is doing stamps right now?
Right, but they go away because we are hostile to them. They go away because we're hostile to them, and we start talking about breaking their protocols. That's what makes them run away.
They go away because they have no financial viability. They
have no financial
viability. They go away like shitcoins, right? Shitcoins don't disappear because Bitcoin maxis are evil to them. There's a million shitcoins.
Ethereum has not disappeared.
Useless. Not because we're mean to them.
Tone, shitcoins don't disappear. You're incorrect. Ethereum is still here. Solana is still here. XRP is still here. The only thing that you can be sure of is that they won't be on Bitcoin as long as Bitcoiners are hostile to them.
Yes.
But the moment we stop being hostile to them, they will absolutely take over.
You are naming,
that's what they're trying to do.
You are naming a few exceptions. The other 10,000 shitcoins, yes, they still exist, but they are irrelevant, right? They become irrelevant because nobody cares. This is why all this shit on Bitcoin goes up and then it disappears.
Well, I think what Chris is saying is that, yeah, like the 3 million shitcoins that have died are gone. But if they were on Bitcoin, that would be a lot of data that you'd have to kind of store forever.
Well, yeah, and also they would still be here, right? If there hadn't been a backlash against ordinals, I guarantee you ordinals would be seeing its heyday right now. I guarantee you it would be flourishing right now. The reason why it isn't is because Bitcoiners said, we don't want this shit on Bitcoin, and we started talking about breaking ordinals.
Chris,
and then
I don't know if you're giving way too much credit to toxic maximalism. You're giving it way too much credit. Like, I don't think the reason why Bitcoin is where it is today is because of toxic maximalists.
Then why? Then why?
But that's definitely not the primary reason.
What is the reason, Tone? Why do you think Bitcoin is different from shitcoins? Why is Bitcoin not a shitcoin? What's the reason?
It's a decentralized protocol that brought something new to
the
equation. Unconfiscatability,
Bitcoin Cash,
value transfer. It's decentralized. It has a 21 million Bitcoin cap. That's not going to change. It doesn't have
an authority to roll back the blockchain. Bitcoin Cash. So does Monero.
Chris. I will name 100 things as to what brought Bitcoin to here before I get to toxic Bitcoin maximalists.
Yeah, so I think sort of directly looking at that and saying the reason why ordinals don't exist is only because of Bitcoin toxic maximalism. I mean, there are lots of economic factors. All of these things have a pump and dump, which most shitcoins do, and they tend to sort of wane as the price crashes and people like sort of get disinterested in that stuff. So, I mean, while I agree that toxic maximalism has definitely contributed to their demise,
Jimmy, it's obvious that the reason why they've stopped their pump and dumps is because they've run out of funding for their pump and dumps. And the reason why they've run out of funding for their pump and dumps is because Bitcoiners are talking about breaking their protocols. It's really, really hard to get funding for a protocol that the Bitcoin devs are going to be at war with you when you're trying to build.
Well, I mean,
it's obvious that they've lost funding.
I think that would be true, but I think the bigger one is also that all of the other things have dumped and people don't want to buy them anymore. I mean, it's true with a lot of other things, right? Meme coins are no longer really that big anymore, and that's on a protocol that's like completely away from Bitcoin, where they're super friendly towards meme coins. It's not about hostility per se, it's just the economic cycles.
Meme coins are still going on Ethereum. Meme coins are still going on Solana. They're just not going on Bitcoin.
Not nearly as much, right? Like
but they're going away, Chris. But they're going away. All this shit is like, do you think Ethereum is growing or do you think Ethereum is declining? Do you think Solana is growing or do you think Solana is declining?
Those things are declining because those degens have flooded into Bitcoin. That's why they're declining.
I don't think they're in Bitcoin. They're definitely, like, at least the chats I'm in, they're not talking about doing Bitcoin stuff.
No, those protocols are declining because they're useless, because they're not decentralized, because they don't do what Bitcoin does. They're not declining because these people are moving to Bitcoin. They're declining because people are realizing that NFTs are trash. And eventually they will realize that. And this is why I don't know
why you're saying that.
NFT is always zero.
NFTs and shitcoins have been around since the beginning. Like, I don't know why you're saying that. You're like, oh, they're going to go away. No, they come in waves, right? They're these people who think only in the short term. It's a very fiat phenomenon, right? Jimmy, you wrote about the fiat standard and how it makes everybody think short term, right? Basically, shitcoining is just fiat, but with a Bitcoin logo slapped on it, right? And so these people are like, oh, we're doing Bitcoin, we're doing decentralized money, but really they're just gambling and they're trying to tell themselves a good narrative. And so that's why, and they tend to not think, too far into the future. And so, they get swept into these hypes, and then there's a dump and they lose all their money and they're depressed for a while, but then it comes right back. Every few years we have one of these stupid pump and dumps. It's like a slightly different form every cycle. Now we're seeing all these treasury stocks, which is, basically the same thing.
Is your support, well, first of all, do you support BIP 110? Is that something that you will run?
Yeah, it's in his Twitter profile.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in that case, is this then a way to sort of understand why you are for it, it's to sort of like fix this cycle of shitcoins on Bitcoin. Is that your rationale for it?
I mean, that's one of the things that it fixes. I mean, so the point of BIP 110, and you can go read it, like it explains all of this. Like the point of it is to state unambiguously that Bitcoin is money and not data storage. Like that's what it's for. And so if and when BIP 110 activates, it will be really, really hard for people who are trying to store data on Bitcoin to say we're doing something legitimate. And it will be really, really easy for people who are trying to build monetary things on Bitcoin to do so, because it will be, using Bitcoin for data stuff will no longer be seen as this, like, it won't be like ambiguous whether Bitcoin might be for data storage or might be for money. It will just be like, no, Bitcoin is money. It will be by consensus.
But you don't see any risk to the entire Bitcoin ecosystem if this fork succeeds.
I see much more risk if it fails. If it succeeds, I don't see any risk at all. No, I mean, have you looked at it? It's a completely common sense measure that does absolutely. It doesn't do anything risky at all. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Oh no, you're right. What do you mean? What risk? Okay, fine. Okay. Let me rephrase that, right? Because you're not looking at it from a global economic perspective, right? You're not.
I am.
No, you're not, right? You're not looking.
Explain to me what the risk is.
Okay, here's the risk. If it starts to become a contentious fork, and the ETFs get out, Saylor decides to get out, and now there are 2 million Bitcoins up for fire sale because they don't know what the fuck's going to happen with the fork. You don't see a risk of Bitcoin going down to like $5,000? You don't have a problem with that?
I mean, so the thing that you're the most scared of is that Saylor is selling and the ETFs are selling? Like, really? Like,
well, no. That's
you forget what we were doing here? Like, Bitcoin is peer-to-peer money. Like, the ETFs don't matter. Saylor doesn't matter. What matters is us doing commerce with each other using free internet cash, using peer-to-peer internet cash.
Yeah,
like,
I would have agreed with you when I joined. When I started going to Bitcoin, like when I was researching it in 2012, 2013.
So what happened?
2014. Well, what happened was Bitcoin is now a little more important than a bunch of cyberpunks, right?
Got captured by Wall Street. That's what happened.
Well, sure. And you want to knock that all down? You think that's bad?
Yes, I think that Bitcoin.
You think it's terrible to get captured by Wall Street? You think it's terrible that Wall Street is buying Bitcoin? You think it's terrible that people are buying Bitcoin, right? See,
I want Bitcoin to be the world reserve currency. I want to destroy fiat. I want to kill the central banks. That's what Bitcoin is here for. We are not messing around. You
don't get to decide
trading stocks.
What Bitcoin is, right? You don't get to decide what Bitcoin is.
I don't get to decide.
The fact that
Bitcoiners get to decide.
Like, Wall Street got into Bitcoin because nothing stopped them, right? Because Bitcoin can't stop them, right? But now
So what you're saying is you want the money printer to win. So this isn't about killing the money printer at all. This is just about everybody gets rich and number go up.
No, it's about keeping Bitcoin alive, right?
No. Bitcoin will be a lot healthier. Bitcoin will be a lot healthier if people start self-custodying more and trusting ETFs less. And if custody stops centralizing in the hands of BlackRock and the U.S. government and Michael Saylor, that would be fantastic. I would be happy about that. If the price goes down in the short term, then so be it. But like, at least it'll be free peer-to-peer money.
It's fantastic for those who don't have any Bitcoin and they can buy it at like 2 cents on the dollar, right? Because if there is a contentious fork over spam, right? Remember, right? Why are we doing? We're not doing it like for quantum resistance. We're not doing it to prevent centralization.
Blame Core30, right? Blame Core30. They were the ones who started it.
No.
Bitcoin Core started this. It was a completely unforced error. They didn't have to remove the upper turn limit, but they went and did it anyway. Now here we are.
The Bitcoin ecosystem is about to go to war with a fork that could become contentious, very contentious, creating massive panic and massive concern over what's going to happen to Bitcoin over spam that may actually be irrelevant. And
It's definitely not actually maybe irrelevant. It's definitely
Yes.
relevant.
It's
definitely relevant whether Bitcoin stays money and doesn't turn into a file storage network. It's definitely relevant.
You can't. There's absolutely no evidence to prove that is going to happen, right?
There's no evidence that the markets will panic either. Like that's the other part where I'm not. So we went through this in 2017. We thought the market was gonna completely panic when we had like 2 Bitcoins. And that didn't happen. That's where I'm not sure I agree with you, Tone, on that. I don't know if the risk is. Well, I don't know how to even figure out the risk on this stuff.
If there is a contentious fork. Remember, this is different than 2017. In 2017, all the actual Bitcoiners, as Chris referred to them as real Bitcoiners, were aligned. We knew who the shitcoiners were, and we knew who the Bitcoiners were in the 2017 fork. In this fork, it actually is Bitcoiners against Bitcoiners, right?
No,
yes, it is, Chris.
It's Bitcoiners against shitcoiners again.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Absolutely.
Yes, it is. It's so the shitcoin. Okay, actually, it's Bitcoin versus the money printer, but the money printer is on the same side as the shitcoiners. The money printer has this, again, it has this short-term fiat culture that is trying to replace Bitcoin's Bitcoin maximalist culture with. And of course, as I already said, this is going to kill Bitcoin because that's what's keeping Bitcoin alive is principled Bitcoiners who take self-custody and care about decentralization. So if Wall Street can and the money printer can fund a bunch of gamblers to come in and take over Bitcoin's culture, then that basically neuters Bitcoin and turns it into something that can absolutely never become the world's reserve asset. And I agree with you, Jimmy. I think the markets will be really, really excited if this fork activates, because what will happen is that Bitcoiners are going to be shouting, "Bitcoin is money," and that's going to be amazing. Bitcoin's going to go to the moon.
Clear, you're both presenting different scenarios, right? One is the markets get excited and we get something like the bull run after the 2017 August 1st hard fork, going from 2,500 to 19,000 or whatever it was, versus Tone's scenario of Bitcoin dropping from 90,000 today down to 5,000 because the markets are panicked and all these ETFs and Michael Saylor get out immediately because they don't know which way Bitcoin is going. I don't know which direction it'll go in. I'm not even saying that one is more probable than the other. I literally cannot figure out the probability of this at the moment because there are just so many things that are unknown. And I get the logic that you guys both have for both of your positions, but I don't think I can say with any form of certainty in either direction, just because there so much of it depends on the rest of the market reacting, and so much of it depends on how people assess things, which I have no idea.
I want to comment on this real quick. So a lot of people are saying, and I heard Mechanic say it on his podcast as well, look at the price since Core v30 came out. Bitcoin's been going down ever since. I can say that since the moment v30 came out, the Knots movement began. And the reason why the price has fallen is because of the Knots movement getting more and more prominence and scaring the market.
So it's all our fault. Bitcoin Core had nothing to do with it.
Right? For everyone that blames Core v30 for lowering the price of Bitcoin, the counter argument is identical. Maybe it's not Core v30 coming out, because if the Knots side didn't make such a big deal over spam that may or may not be relevant, maybe the market would not have been going down, right? So
they completely upended the social contract. Bitcoiners have always fought against data spam. This has been happening forever.
We're speculating on something that we're never going to come to a conclusion on because
I agree, and this is why I see a contentious fork coming. I don't see an agreement.
So let me summarize. I think that what the difference that we're having is that, Tone, you're worried about short-term effects. You're worried that a contentious fork is going to tank the price in the short term. But I'm thinking about the long-term health of Bitcoin. I'm thinking if we can make Bitcoin usable in commerce, and we can make declare that data spam is not a legitimate usage of Bitcoin, then that's going to be really, really healthy for Bitcoin's long-term value. And I'm in it for the long term. I'm not in it for the number go up in the short term.
Well, I'm looking at it from the long-term perspective as well. And if Bitcoin has a contentious hard fork where I see this going,
it's not a hard fork, Tone. Why are you calling it a hard fork? It's not a hard fork. It's a soft fork.
We talked about this last time. If it's a soft fork, because of the wipeout risk, I think some sort of two permanent chains that are that can't overtake each other is inevitable, just because no one's going to accept the wipeout risk from the other side. That's
my concern.
That's just theoretically what
definitely not going to happen.
That's
definitely not going to happen.
Well, okay. In my opinion, the fork. I mean, in my opinion, the fork is going to fail. I know in your opinion, the fork is going to succeed. In my opinion, the fork is going to fail. Because,
all right, that's ridiculous.
And the reason. Say again.
That's ridiculous. There is absolutely no reason to oppose this fork.
Okay. Well, no.
If you don't want it to be contentious, Tone, you should support it. Oh, there's no reason to oppose this fork unless you're a spammer.
I'm not supporting the fork, and I'll explain why.
Unless you like spam, that's the only reason to oppose the fork.
No. I care about the long-term success of Bitcoin, and I see a high probability of Bitcoin being permanently damaged with this soft fork, unless it fails quickly. If the fork actually gets traction, and there is a fork, the soft fork turns into a contentious hard fork, permanently damaging Bitcoin. This, unlike the last one,
that's a wild that's a wild scenario. I don't think that's likely at all.
And for that reason, I cannot be on board supporting this fork, because the risk of this fork grossly outweighs the benefit that this fork will bring to the network.
I mean, that's a very, very improbable outcome. I don't even think I really don't think that's possible at all. So I don't know if have you guys talked about soft forks and how BIP110 is like tightening the rules, and so there's a wipeout risk for the old chain.
Right. This is what we talked about last time with Wirdum, is that you do have the soft fork advantage. The thing is, though, like, and this is something that Wirdum brought up, no one wants to take like a 50-50 bet on whether or not this fork succeeds. And like, I get that you're very gung-ho about it at the moment, but like that is at least one piece of data on the level of conviction that the people on the side of this fork have.
Right, but
I don't know if they really think it's going to happen, because they're not willing to take it at least at a 50-50 basis. So people
are only staying on the fence right now, like you guys, because they don't want to support it because they think it's going to be contentious. But if you actually think for yourself, stop listening to the talking heads. You realize there's actually no reason.
I'm not listening to anyone, right? All the talking heads are pro-knots, right? This is the same thing. It's
no. They're talking heads on both sides. But regardless.
Anyway,
why is the soft fork going to, like, for me, I think it's obvious the move is some sort of like soft fork in another direction so that it's invalid on that side, and then you get two separate chains. And
I'm just saying, like, if you want this soft fork to not be contentious, the solution is to convince everyone to run this soft fork and support it. There's absolutely no reason to be opposed to it.
You know what this? You know where I heard this last time? Roger Ver.
Oh man, Roger Ver said a thing, and so
if
somebody else says a thing, says that thing. It must be a terrible person like Roger Ver.
Chris, what you're saying is
he literally said that to me word for word the way you just said.
If you don't want it to be contentious, then just join us.
Guys, that's a completely different scenario. That was a hard fork, okay? BIP110 is not a hard fork. That is a completely different scenario and would definitely not succeed. BIP110 is a soft fork and is way, way more likely to succeed, almost certain to succeed. Actually, it is certain to succeed. There are no technical arguments against BIP110. There are no social arguments. There are no cultural arguments against BIP110. There is absolutely no reason to oppose this fork, except the flood of it might be contentious. It's not going to be contentious.
I don't think that's the only argument. We definitely had other arguments with Wirdum, and part of it was that it goes way too far. He was saying, I would support it if it just reduced stop return to 80 bytes or 160 bytes or something like that. He said it's trying to do too much, and for him it was like we should go like.
We can get into that if you want.
He was also saying I would support OpCat, I would support OpCTV, LNHands, all these soft forks, and he was even open to, hey, if we reduce op return to 160, that's something that I would support. But this particular one for him was threw too many things in the sink and like sort of restricted script in a way that was too overbroad.
I mean, it's very consistent, right? This softworks rules are very very self-consistent. If you understand what the motivation of the fork is. So as I said, the motivation is to reject data storage at the consensus level. And so if you understand that's the motivation, you understand why just limiting op return is not sufficient, because just limiting op return does not take care of inscriptions, which have already been legitimized by Bitcoin Core. And then there are also a bunch of other ways to stuff data in the chain that are contiguous. And so if you can store contiguous data in the chain, it kind of looks like that's a supported use case of Bitcoin. And so what BIP 110 does is it turns off op return greater than 83 bytes. It turns off inscriptions, and it limits all of the ways to store contiguous data that are greater than 256 bytes. And so you can still store data if you want, if you cut it up into a bunch of little pieces. But by requiring people to do that, it shows that storing data in the blockchain is not an officially supported use case. So Chris, that's why it doesn't go too far. It goes exactly as far as it needs to go to achieve its purpose, which is to reject data storage.
And you led me right into the next thing I was going to say, which is, I know Wirdum said that if this soft fork was only reducing the op return to 80, he would support it. I still wouldn't support it, and I'll explain why, even if it was only reducing op return back. Because the success of this fork and everything you just said as what the Knots camp wants to do, the success of this fork completely removes core from coding the Bitcoin code. And yes,
no, it doesn't.
I know you can make a face, but that's what it will do. It will, the success of this fork completely removes core developers from coding the protocol.
What are you talking about, Tone? You're going to have to, you can't just make claims and then not explain them.
Okay.
How is it going to do that?
When we had Merch on the show, he clearly explained that the inscriptions bug is not a bug. It's a feature that the core developers put in.
Exactly.
And they don't.
So core legitimized data storage.
Hold on. So the core developers that have all done this up to this point, if all of their work over the last 5 years, 7 years, if all of their work over the last 7 years is being reverted and removed by...
That's not all of their work. That's one thing that they did.
It's more than one. You just named like 5 things. You literally just named 5 things, right? The big 5 things. Right?
They're not that big, to be honest. Like they're like any core dev will tell you that.
Yeah,
most of their work goes into fuzz testing and network efficiency and taking out like DOS vulnerabilities and things like that, which have nothing to do with consensus. These are very tiny.
Adding cool features like scan blocks and stuff, and assume UTXO and things like that.
Let's rephrase it. If Knots forks,
they're still going to be doing that after this fork activates.
Chris, if the Knots forks, right now we have 5 core maintainers. I think a 6th was just added.
I mean, it's not a Knots fork. I don't like that characterization. It's a Bitcoiner fork. These are real OG cypherpunk Bitcoiners who want Bitcoin to be
You can say your objections after. Let's let Tone finish. Okay.
Right. So no, it's a Knots fork, right? Like again, like the Bcash people hated it when I called it Bcash, right? They were like, no, it's real Bitcoin. No, it's Bcash, right? So no, I'm gonna call it
because it was a hard fork. It was an altcoin because it was a hard fork.
Well, let Tom finish his point. So why are the core developers going to quit after a success of a soft fork like that?
All 5 core maintainers are going to lose their keys. They're going to be replaced, correct?
No.
What are you talking about? Bitcoin Core is going to keep existing.
Lose their keys?
Bitcoin Core will be just fine, Tone. I don't know what you're talking about. It's gonna keep doing what it's always been doing. Except
why
now,
would they Tone? Why would they lose their keys? I don't understand what you're saying.
I see the Bitcoin Knots movement as the removal of Bitcoin Core, right? Like one of the reasons why this is happening is because of all of the changes that Bitcoin Core
but
has.
why would they lose their keys? Why I'm completely I've
you're
completely
talking
lost
nonsense.
you on that. Like they have their own keys. It's like they add the public key to the maintainers list. That's what they do.
So who would be so the same maintainers would stay
on the Bitcoin Core project?
On
Yeah,
Bitcoin Core.
absolutely. I mean, they could change it if they want, but I don't see why they would.
Yeah, they'll just keep doing their Bitcoin Core dev things like they've always done.
Okay, fine.
Nobody's removing.
So then explain how this is not going to be a contentious hard fork.
No, but you said
it's definitely not going to be a contentious hard fork.
You said before, if this succeeds, then all the core devs will go away somehow. I'm trying to make that connection. Are you saying then that Knots would be the dominant client and no one will run core anymore? Or
Tone is trying to draw a parallel between the OG cypherpunk movement that's wanting to fork Bitcoin right now. He's trying to draw a parallel between them and Bitcoin Cash, which is completely wrong in so many ways. Bcash, again, for the third or fourth time, was a hard fork, which creates an altcoin.
Right. I don't think we need to go over that part, but like I'm still trying to understand, Tone. Like, is that what you're saying? Is that then if this succeeds, then Knots becomes the dominant client instead of Core? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, that might be the case. I personally don't think so, because if you're running pre-Core 30 or even Core 30 code, you're going to go with the longest chain, even post Core 30, depending on whether or not they have like some sort of like software code that Knots doesn't do or something like that. I mean, like in case you get something like that, then everybody that's running Core that's before whatever the software happened is still going to be running Core and be on the same chain. Yeah. So I'm not sure where you get this idea that everyone would be running Knots.
I'm not explaining it right? You're right. Before version 30, so if someone's running version...
I mean, even version 30 right now, at least with respect to this BIP 110, doesn't care. It'll follow the longest chain.
Yeah, exactly. And more than that, Bitcoin Knots is based on Bitcoin Core right now. So like Bitcoin Knots rebases every time it does a release on a release of Bitcoin Core. It may be diverging more soon for obvious reasons. But Bitcoin Knots depends on a lot of the features that Bitcoin Core writes.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if you have Knots development if you don't have Core development, because it's so dependent on it. Is the other?
I mean, you could, right? Like it is definitely making moves in that direction.
This is what I'm trying to explain, but I'm not doing a good job of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Bitcoin Core will still be there, right?
I think what you're saying, Tone, then is that Knots would have a lot more influence, maybe, and like I don't know, they'd have more say in Core development or something, and that a lot of the Core devs would quit or something like that. I'm trying to understand where what you think are the big risks of a soft fork succeeding. Now, I personally don't think it's that likely.
Right.
But say that it does, then what happens to Core? What do you suppose will have what will merge do, right? Like what will I don't know, like Peter Woolley do? Like are they gonna stop coding Core? Like what
I think Merch would. I actually we can ask him. I think Merch would stop coding. And there will be other people like Merch. But that's just my opinion. We can ask Merch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he would. I think he cares too much about Bitcoin to just sort of quit over something like that. I mean, there could be rage quits. I have no doubt that some people would do that based on some result that they didn't like. But vast majority of these people aren't working anywhere near this code, right? They're working on network efficiency and the level DB and fuzz testing infrastructure and things like that. Like that, those are the things that they're working on. Consensus is almost almost never touched, actually. Like it's the vast majority of core work is on removing boosts from C++, stuff like that. It's not anything like that exciting. Like, hey, let's implement this rule or something. And and frankly, I'm not even sure a lot of those people care, right, about this particular issue per se. Like, and who knows? Like, if people like Chris and Luke and Mechanic are able to like make the case more to them, they might even agree. I don't even know. That's my impression of core devs in general, is that most of them don't like this drama. They don't want to be a part of it, and they'd rather just sit down and code stuff, like, you know, make new fuss.
Well, again, you're helping me make the argument that if the fork succeeds, then a lot of these Bitcoin Core developers will walk away.
Why would they walk away? They like working on this stuff.
You just said they don't.
Yeah, why? Yeah, why would they?
No,
walk away?
They don't care about this issue per se.
Yeah, they just want to work
like
on
working on. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there's a guy. There's a feature that was released the other day where you can connect to a node over Tor or I2P, send your transaction and disconnect. That way, like, no one knows where it came from. That sort of thing, right? And that's a useful privacy feature. That's something that does not touch the code at all, right? On consensus, this is more sort of like network communication stuff. And, you know, like, soft fork or no, that person's probably going to want to continue working on stuff like that, where you get more privacy at like a network level. Like, that's something that you can do regardless of whether the soft fork succeeds or not.
Yeah, Bitcoin core devs are engineers that like working on interesting problems in Bitcoin. And, you know, like, don't get me wrong, like, they do a lot of good work, but they've made some very serious blunders recently.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't treat them as a single entity. Obviously, there's a lot of them, and many of them have very different opinions on stuff like that. But like the point, Tone, with this particular line of you know, future scenarios is I don't believe that core devs would just suddenly quit, right? Like, I mean, a couple might rage quit, but I mean, vast majority of them, you don't even know the names to, right? And they like it that way. They don't want to be known. They like working in the background and working on little, you know, their little corner fiefdom of code and doing stuff in that. And like, they couldn't care less about the drama. Some of them don't even own Bitcoin, right? Like, they don't care, right? Like, that this is like more an interesting open source project for them. And I know lots of people like that. They like interesting problems. They like making a difference in sort of like the real world through open source. And they're not on Twitter. They're not you know, like, even on Nostr or anything. They're maybe on GitHub and, you know, put in like 3 or 4 pull requests a year or something like that, and they're happy doing that. It's not who you would think they are. They're not ideologically driven per se.
All right. I do have to wrap it up in 5 minutes. Chris will talk to you in person, but all right, I'll just close out on, I could be completely wrong on this, but to me, the success of this fork leads to a path to completely replacing core devs as being in charge. Again, I could, like I said, Chris, I can be 100% wrong, right? My view is that the success of this BIP is the beginning of the path for full replacement of Bitcoin core devs with NOTS approved devs. And I would have a lot less trust in Bitcoin as a decentralized network with the success of this fork. Again,
Tony, you can keep running Bitcoin Core. If you like the Bitcoin Core dev team, if you like the Bitcoin Core dev team, you can just keep running Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core will remain the dominant client if by and large the network trusts the Bitcoin Core team. Bitcoin NOTS will only grow in popularity insofar as people like running Bitcoin NOTS better than Bitcoin Core. So if Bitcoin NOTS becomes the default, the dominant node on the Bitcoin network, that just means it's the best. That just means it's the best client. So I mean, you're basically. It sounds like you don't don't want Bitcoin Core to become less popular. And that's sort of like your biggest concern. But I mean, if Bitcoin Core is making serious mistakes, then I think the network should.
Well, I disagree.
There should be a penalty for that.
I think they're mistakes, but I don't think these are mistakes that, in this case,
right. But if 90% of the Bitcoin network disagrees with you,
well, no, only 90% of Twitter disagrees with me, right?
No. I mean, I think Chris is talking about a success scenario, in which case it would be like 90%.
Right. Again, in my view, taking a risk to potentially burn it all down over a little bit of spam, which may or may not even be harmful to the Bitcoin network, is a risk I wish this community didn't take, but we're not taking that risk.
It's not a risk. It's not a risk. And here's the thing: is if and when BIP 110 gets close to activation, Bitcoin Core is going to incorporate it, and you can just keep running Bitcoin Core the same as you always have. Like, Bitcoin Core is not going away. I don't know why you seem to be like, oh no, Knots is taking over. Like, I mean, like, it might if everybody likes Bitcoin Knots, but if everybody still likes Bitcoin Core after this fork activates, then people are still going to run Bitcoin Core.
Right, well, we'll see. I don't think it's going to activate. But
well, so I disagree with both of you, to be honest. Like, I'm not nearly as certain that it'll completely undermine Core, and I'm not certain that there's no risk in this either. Like, there's definitely some risk because there's too many unknowns in this thing to be able to confidently say, okay, well, this is exactly what will happen. I actually have no idea what's going to happen, and I have no problem saying that because there are just so many unknowns, most of which actually revolve around what other people will do, how other people will think about this, and what the dominant narrative will be going towards this. And I think in this way, Tone, you're right in that the cultural cachet that that Core has maybe does reduce significantly if this soft fork succeeds, and maybe that does lead to maybe not the abandonment of Core, but at least a significant diminishing of their influence on the network. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Hard to say, right? Like, this is where there's so many unknowns here, right? Does that, on the one hand, you're maybe decentralizing the network in terms of development a little more. On the other hand, you might be losing a lot of expertise that's been built up over 15 years. I don't know, right? And this is where I'm very comfortable saying, like, I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't know if this is even really risky or not risky at all. I have no idea whether or not people will be like abandoning things, rage quitting, if people will en masse move towards one side or the other. I don't have a clue. And but this is honestly one of the things that happens in decentralized system is that people do things that maybe you don't agree with, and you might shout to the rooftops as a way to influence people. Hey, this is what's going to happen if you do this. They might be right, they might be wrong, but what I can't say is that I know with certainty this is going to happen and this is going to happen. I can't even make a risk function right now. Like that's how difficult this is to sort of like calculate in terms of moves and counter moves and all the different narratives that might come out, all the different ways in which people might deal with this. So that's, in that way, I think both of you have way too much certainty on what's going to happen.
All right, Chris, any final thoughts?
Yeah, support BIP 110. I think it's going to get consensus pretty fast. I think it's going to activate early. And I think we're going to, as a community, I think it'll be really healing for us to activate that so we can move past this and start making Bitcoin the money of the future.
All right. And in my view, when enough support for the Bitcoin Knots isn't there, the Bitcoin Knots camp is going to double down, and eventually I think it will lead to a hard fork.
See, I'm not even sure that's true, right? Like, I don't think they'll double down either, or I don't think that's certain. So there's so many variables here, and I could see scenarios where even the Knots camp splits into, or the Core camp splits into, and then you have like 4 or 5 different parties, and they all have their own vision for what Bitcoin's supposed to be. I have no idea, right? Like, this is where this is one of the most confusing and difficult things to predict, in part because of the just moving parts and the unknowns.
And this is why we're doing the show.
Fair enough.
And this is why I was so happy not talking about Bitcoin anymore. And now I'm
back. You're gonna talk some more about it next week.
I thought I was out, but they sucked me back in.
That's pretty much it, man. That's pretty much it. All right. All right. Thank you all for watching, guys.
Thanks,
Chris,
Noan. Thanks, Jimmy.
thanks for joining. Jimmy, thanks again. Unlike the last one, it's a little harder for me to articulate my views, but I think you guys get the point as to why I am very concerned. I'm not all that crazy over core. I think the core maintainers need to be better. I will be the first one to admit I'm not happy with what they're doing. But to me, the risk of this fork are too great, and it shouldn't over spam. I think is ridiculous.
It's a decentralized system. They could do what they want. That's
Well, we'll find. We'll know soon which way it's headed.
Well, there needs to be some sort of closure, and our side is the only side offering something that's going to bring some kind of closure. The other side is just like, well, I guess we're just going to have to put up with spammers. So I don't think that's a good option.
All right. Thank you for watching, guys. And I'm not sure if there'll be another episode before El Salvador, but we'll try to bring you one from El Salvador.
Sounds good.
Bye, guys.